Can you faint? It's good enough.
We are recording now.
15th of April 2021, Unit 8 FMP pitch, Lewis Draper, Rebecca Jones.
Welcome to our short pitch. Short film. So our film will be called Tomorrow Morning, which is wordplay. We're playing on the word morning with warning, as in the grief kind of morning. And this plays in because we are going to be doing our short film about the 5 stages of grief. And we plan to have 2 characters portray each stage individually, but also running alongside each other. And they will eventually come along and meet up in the end, and obviously that is where the film will end. We're producing it for the Young Minds charity, which is a charity that helps young people with grief, but also with mental health, which both tie into each other. And we will be doing this so that we get the feel that they are a client for this project, and it will help us to develop our skills using that. And our objective is to inform people about the 5 stages of grief, and this is by visually showing them this. For our inspiration, we didn't really have an initial idea until this one, and we were quite inspired by it, but it also helped that we have both had personal experiences within our lives, and that then has allowed us to develop this idea using our personal experiences in order to just help it improve and help it become a feasible project.
We were also inspired by Bridge to Terabithia, which is a book and film, and it shows all 5 stages of grief, and it's about a loss of a friend, and it's an unexpected death, so it's similar to ours.
For an overview of content, we will have the 5 stages of grief, which will be a visual representation of each stage, which is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. There will be 2 perspectives, one male and one female, and they will each be showing it in their own way, and then obviously they come together at the end. There will be a loss of 2 friends, one friend linked to each character, and they will be involved in the same tragedy, which will then allow us to begin the film. And for music, we will have different music tracks to portray different stages of each stage of grief. And for an example, we would have a slow tempo track for depression, which would then help us to show depression, rather than just say, or have a title that says depression. For potential scenes and music, we have an idea of flashbacks and memories, which could then show the characters and how the friend links to a character, and obviously showing their relationship, so that then it's not just a character dies and a character is affected, it shows how they were affected. We also want to have looking at physical photos, which would then require the use of props, which we will talk about later. With anger, which is one of the stages, we could show a smashing of objects, a slamming of doors to then visually represent anger, rather than try and show it all the same way throughout. And then we have a coming together scene at the end, which is obviously accepting loss, which is our last topic, and then them coming together and moving on past the grief. And we have a potential music track which we were going to use for acceptance, which has a slow start up, but it is a very light track which it gives an idea of hope. Moving on, it's a hopeful future.
Okay, for our market research, we looked into why people watch short films, and we also looked into if short films were affected by COVID, and this helped us determine whether we had a target audience for the product we want to achieve. And I also found out that short films were not impacted by COVID, they actually made them more popular, because there was a new added show on Netflix called Homemade, and it was actually by all different directors that made short films about COVID. So we know there's a target audience out there that watch short films and would be interested. And we've also both looked into the 5 stages of grief and how it's shown visually in films. And this gave us a better understanding of the 5 stages of grief and how grief is portrayed visually, which will help us when storyboarding.
For charity research, I actually looked into the domain of the charity, which we have a graph here, which shows the traffic of the website in the last, I'd say, 12 months. So starting from April 2020, you can see that there's actually a gradual increase in traffic towards the website. And because we're using this website as a base for our video, it shows that we then have a target audience for this video, and that it fits in with the idea of the client, and that if we produce this for them, they would then be able to use it and show it to people, and it will be seen. This also links into our genres, because using grief is we plan to show it in a very dramatic way, and that showing it in a dramatic way is an easy way for people to interpret and understand it, and then because it's easy to interpret, having it for the charity then allows the audience to easily interpret it.
So this is a production mood board of the potential props we could use and the type of lighting we want to use. So for the potential props, we want to use photos, frames, to show how close the characters were, and it could help tell a story. And for the alcohol, I saw this used in another short film about grief, and it's also good to use because our target audience are strugglers, which we'll go into more detail later, but they consume alcohol and junk food and so on. And for the lighting, we want to use low-key lighting, high-key lighting, and some silhouette shots, because for the high-key lighting we could use for the acceptance stage to show that they're coming back into reality, and low-key lighting could be used in the depression stage to show that they're locked out of reality, and it could reflect how they're feeling, and that could also go to the silhouette shots. And we also want to use warm, natural light, because we find that in the denial stage it's more like they're still in reality and they're in shock, so it would be better to use warm, natural light. And these are the clips of how So as you can see in that clip, it showed him coming back into reality, and we want to use that kind of lighting for our acceptance stage. And in this clip, you can kind of see how it's darker and you can't really see what's happening, and we want to use that in the depression stage. And this is an audio clip because we want to, we're not sure yet, we need to research further into this, but we want to do a voiceover perhaps to show how they're feeling more, like in inner thoughts, so we can understand more about how grief is, as I found that in some in films it's a bit harder to show how grief is, and when I read a book about grief it went into more detail about how they feel. So this is an example.
I wish I could scream sometimes. I wish I could set my heart free from this pain.
So that's an example of inner thoughts, and that was also taken from a short film about grief.
I wish I could scream sometimes.
These are shot types that we could use for our short film, because we plan to use low-angle shots to show the character as more powerful and in control, so these could be used for the acceptance stage, so they're back in reality, they're in control of their emotions. And high-angle shots can show the character as weak, vulnerable, so that could be in the depression stage. Long shots help clarify where the character is in terms of location. Extreme close-ups can help focus on specific features and more facial expressions or objects, and mid-shots help show what the character is doing in that moment, and close-ups help show emotion, which will be important in our short film. This is a clip taken from a short film about grief again, and this is an example of the type of match cuts we can use. We found that one interesting as it's kind of an angle one, so we could use a shot like that in our anger stage as she smashes, and then it's a match cut and it's a change of location, so it could also be a good transition. And we also like this one because of the transition of her wiping her face, because this could be from a flashback of the character being happy maybe, and then she wipes her face, and then it's back to reality of her after the loss of their friend.
So for our primary target audience, we were to look between the ages of 15 and 25 and the psychodemographic of strugglers. This is due to them being more likely to have experienced grief, which then puts them into the category as they develop tendencies that would then put them in the struggler category. At this age, the people tend not to understand their emotions fully, or not understand how to deal with their emotions fully, and as such, this film would then be there to help them understand. Our secondary target audience, which is between the ages of 35 to 45, and it's aimed at professionals and people related to the bereaved. This is so that it's not aimed just at the people going through grief, but the people who would have to help the people going through grief accept it and move on. This is so that they would understand how to help, give them ideas on how to help them and help to develop it in ways, and perhaps even be a guide to show them what they're going through and how they can come out of it.
For distribution, we were going to decide in our questionnaire where we will also distribute our short film, because we're certain we'll distribute on YouTube and it would be seen on the Young Minds website, but we want to make sure we reach all of our target audience. So by doing a questionnaire, we will make sure that there's other sites that could be used, like Vimeo. That could also be another platform that our target audience access.
For production roles and responsibilities, the primary director will be Rebecca and I will be the primary producer. We'll both be producing separate edits of this short film. And while we will be doing all the work together, we'll be assigning tasks to each other individually. And while we can both help on the tasks, the one who is assigned the task will be taking lead over that task. We'll both be carrying out location recce's and test shots. This is because some areas are easier for myself to access and some areas are easier for Rebecca to access. Not only that, but we can't go into certain locations due to COVID. So in such situations, obviously, I can only take certain shots in certain locations and Rebecca can only take certain shots in certain locations. We will also be recording production meetings in order to keep track of our progress as a team, and we will be conducting primary research together, such as the interviews and the questionnaires. We'll be going through it together and making sure that we analyse it together.
So I conducted some research into short film production, and it gave me some tips and advice for how to shoot a short film with a low budget. And it mentioned how we should have a cast with friends and family, which me and the producer have done. And it also mentioned how the crew should be the two people, so we don't have to hire a crew. And we've made contingency days, and we've separated all of our production, so we would both have enough time to gather all the shots, as it won't be a big crew, it would only be me and Lewis. And as budget will be kept to a minimum, we will have to use sort of resources that we already have or we can easily access. And in terms of equipment, we'll need a tripod, an XF100, a lighting kit, a dolly, a zoom recorder, and so on, which in the schedule we have already arranged when we will be booking the production, so we are sorted for that, and we also know when we're going to receive feedback for our short film, so we don't have to worry about that later on.
For our logistical resources, for actors, we will have one outside crew member with us at a time. While there will be two, we won't have them filming together. This is so that we are keeping as safe as possible during these times, especially with COVID. We will also be making sure that we are keeping COVID safe, which will be discussed later on. For costumes, at the beginning of the film and throughout, it will be changing. However, the idea is that we have dark, baggy clothing for the beginning, and that will slowly change into more smart, presentable, lighter clothing towards the end in acceptance, which we've discussed under the costume section. And for props, we've definitely gone with mobile phones, as that's a way to show communication through flashbacks between the friends in order to develop their relationship. And we also have ideas like photos and photographs that we can use to show the relationship, but also things like rubbish, which can help to subtly show the mood of the character through their surroundings.
So this is a clip of costumes and locations that could potentially be used. And in the clip you can see how the clothing is dark, it's got dark blue, dark brown and the clothing is black and dark, and then in the last two clips it's blue, white, or one top has a mixture of colours. And in the locations I found in my questionnaire research for target audience, I found that most common locations for films were subways, woods, houses, so that is what's on the clip, but this will probably be decided in our questionnaire as well. For what research needs to be done next, we have decided that we need to conduct a questionnaire to help finalise decisions and maybe gain some more feedback from our audience of what they would like to see. And we also want to do more research into props so we can understand the more meaning of props and maybe get some new ideas for the type of props that we want to use. And we need to do some research into music, like sourcing some music tracks that we can use, and more on how music reflects the mood of the characters and how music can reflect on how the person's feeling within. And we also need to look at specific production techniques, as we'll be using a software that we haven't used before. So we will need to research into effects, transitions, and we also need to research into tutorials for equipment, because although Lewis has used the lighting kit before, that was a long time ago, so we need to review that, and we haven't used the dolly yet, so we also need to have a tutorial for that to ensure that production runs smoothly. We'll also be doing voiceover research, because we need to decide if we want to have a voiceover in our short film. So we'll be looking at examples of what we could do and a news report. And we are planning for an interview with an actor to gain some advice for how to portray grief, which would help us in production and storyboarding.
Technical and production issues. So the biggest production issue we believe to be is COVID, due to it still having quite a bit of an effect on production, our crew size, and how we're going to do things. But we will be making sure that there are masks, that people are socially distanced, and that there is hand gel on us at all times, so that we can make sure that we are as safe as possible when filming, especially with an outside actor. For filming locations, especially with the public is, we can't predict how the public will be and how certain members of the public may act around cameras. So we will have to make sure that we're not filming members of the public unwillingly, and that they are, as long as they give consent to be in the film, that they are in it, and those who do not want to be in it are not filmed. We'll also be using new software, which can be difficult when beginning. However, we will be relying on our feedback in order to see if we miss anything, and we'll be relying on the tutorials in order to learn how to use that software. And we do have contingency days in order to make sure that we have finalised any research, any ideas, and we also have production days set that are just for pickup shots, so that we can go back and pick up anything that we missed. We also plan to get the weather forecast on our filming day, so that we know what the weather will be like, and obviously we can plan ahead and use our contingency day if need be. Any questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to listen to your pitch and your presentation, your idea. Every time I was writing down questions, then they would
came
soon
up.
be
Yeah, I
answered.
did a lot of deleting.
So there was quite a few. But there were a few that were right.
Okay, so when it comes to narrative, correct me if I'm wrong, because we are doing lots of this.
Yeah.
You have both really understood the 5 stages of grief really well, and everything that you referred to went back to the 5 stages of grief. What I'm not quite understanding, I've got 2 protagonists,
Yep.
and the storylines are running parallel, then
Yes.
at the end they come together.
Yes.
What's happening in these parallel worlds before they come together?
Would you like to answer this one, or should I?
You can answer if you want.
Okay, so we have the 2 characters running alongside, and we have the film on our side segmented into 5, which is 1 minute for each stage of grief. And then what will be happening is we'll then segment that into half, or roughly around half, and each character will be showing that stage of grief, but in their own way.
Yeah.
So we'll be showing, anger, one character can be frustrated with themselves, maybe breaking down, crying, and the other character could be throwing things, breaking things, and showing a very volatile, aggressive, outwardly anger.
So at this moment in time, those 30-second segments, we'll call them, do you know exactly what's happening in each of those? You need to do more research.
We need to do more research, but we have some ideas that can be developed in those 30-second segments.
So you've given a good example of anger. Could you give an example of one of the other stages and what you have been initially discussing?
So for depression, we could have one where they're locked away in their room. It could be just them locked away and their room is messy and they're just, it could be an out of focus shot as well really. And they could just be locked out of reality. And then another one could be they're crying or they're breaking down, because this could show two different perspectives from the female and the male side.
And maybe just not getting out of bed,
Mhm.
not eating, just kind of pushing food away. So the kind of things that where you're not engaging, because if you're depressed, that you don't want to.
Yeah, and like finding other ways to cope. So like consuming alcohol or consuming junk food. So it's just like being lazy and relying on stuff to cope because you can't yourself.
So you've explored lots of ways to visualise these emotions and stages that are going through, to make them visual on screen. So now it's just pinning them down and what order and what goes where. Is that right?
Yeah, I think one of the probably the only thing coming out of this is that narrative. So I'm not saying I would expect today to see this is happening here, then this and this, but I would like to know.
I think that's your next stage.
The next stage
Yeah.
is now you've done some brilliant research, you really understand the 5 stages of grief, but actually what's happening in the film,
Yeah.
that's the bit that we need to know.
Externalisation of what's
Okay.
going on inside the characters to how that's going to be shown on screen in
Yeah.
a really visual way.
So if the male is drinking alcohol and having the junk food, what's the female doing? Because you want to show how people react differently.
Yeah.
So I just want to know what those bits are. And I would suggest you kind of want to know that before you go into pre-production, because
Yeah.
that's going to take quite a lot of time to pin
Mhm.
down what you're doing. And if you're trying to write a script and you haven't got that bit clarified,
Yeah.
that's then going to eat into your script time.
Mhm.
So when you finish your research, I would then say big production meeting, let's get all of this down, you know,
Yeah.
big piece of paper, each
Yeah,
scene.
post-it note exercise.
Yeah.
Like
Because
these
you
are
might
all the
move things
scenes,
around.
Mhm.
Like what order can we put them in? Like
Yeah.
we did with music video. Perhaps use that technique.
And it might just be the way you described it, but you know when you said you're going to segment the film,
Yeah.
just in terms of planning or visually are we segmenting? Are we going to have chapter headings, for example?
Yeah, visually it would be like stage one, so we make it clear to the audience what stage the person is. So stage one, denial, and then it will
As
show.
far as text on screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Titles.
Yeah, so in that sense then, although it is a short film, it's also a bit of an educational tool. So
Yeah,
in terms of
it's
distribution, you might even want to think about colleges and, you know, like
Yeah.
student support kind of services that
Mhm.
it could be distributed as another
Yeah.
avenue of distribution.
I really like the idea of the inner thoughts as well. And have you any ideas yet of specific statements or the type of statements you can imagine being said?
So first for the voiceover is going to be a report which clarifies for the audience how the people died. So we are
So
going
it's
to
like
look into more like
A
reports.
news report? An
Yeah.
incident report?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we plan for them to have a car crash because it's like an unexpected death, so the people weren't expecting it. And then for inner thoughts, for bargaining, it could be something like, I wish I did this, I wish I went to there that day, or
Mhm.
and for denial it could be, oh, this can't be happening to me, this, yeah. And for depression, you could explain how they're feeling, so, oh, I feel so alone, you know, stuff like that.
And are they going to be, at the moment you might not have resolved this or not, but are they going to be lots of different voices to represent different people's experiences of grief, or are they going to be the characters' voices to represent their internal thoughts?
I think we discussed it. I think we were going to go with the characters'
Yeah.
voices.
So that's breaking the 4-4, isn't it?
Yeah, but there's, yeah.
So I know this is a completely different thing, but you
Yeah.
know Deadpool, how he talks out loud?
Yes.
That's what you mean, right?
Yeah.
So another form of your research could be looking into films similarly and how they break the 4-4, because they do it a lot in comedy because
Yeah.
I think they're thinking about, when we've discussed before, about just that they're going to be voiceover.
So
they
they're not
won't be
going to talk
saying
to the camera?
but they'll
No,
just
it'll be
be
more like
just a
just
voiceover. You can
talking
hear the
in
voice,
the
you
head.
see the actions, and then you
But
hear the voice.
couldn't we talk about this to our interview with the actor? Because
Yeah.
he
See
may
how
know
they-
more about
Yeah,
breaking
Yeah.
because it is something, an interesting idea you could
Yeah.
explore.
Yeah.
Definitely.
because you might want, because obviously everyone's different in terms of their confidence as well, so you might even have one character that breaks the 4-4 and speaks to the camera, but the
Yeah.
other one as a voiceover might just be something different, so it's not too samey across the whole film.
Just wanted to know as well, how do you foresee yourself, because obviously if you're acting in it and you're filming it, how do you foresee this working? What are the logistics of doing that?
I think, well, we did say that Rebecca's primarily role was director and mine would be producer, that would be kind of interchangeable. So as she would then go into act, I would take on temporarily the
So
role
you're
of director.
hoping to be able to film with each other, and you would be camera, and then
Yeah.
Rebecca would act, and then vice versa.
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, Rebecca can still direct when she acts
Yeah.
because she'll cut, go look at the camera, get back
Yeah.
into position, etc.
Yeah,
Um,
and obviously a bit earlier in the stage we were worried that they might have to film themselves.
Yeah.
But now I think as that things are opening up,
Yes.
things are improving, the odds are that you'll be able to go.
Well,
to
they're
each
a
other's-
bubble, aren't they?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
So-
true. So you'll be able to.
I know this is a sensitive subject, but I wondered if you had interviewed anyone about grief.
I was planning to, but I felt like it might be a bit, you know.
It's so sensitive.
It's a
Yeah.
very hard topic
Yeah.
to discuss
Yeah.
with people.
But I think it depends at what stage of grief they
That's
are.
true.
If it's someone that's come out of grief, they may be in a position where they
Mhm.
want to talk about grief. I think if you're going to make something about something that's sensitive, I think having an interview
Yeah.
would really inform your research.
Mhm.
And I appreciate that's difficult to find somebody, but if you can, I think it would really enhance your research.
Yeah, we'll consider looking into that, and we'll do the questions together so we can make sure they're not too.
Yeah, and I'm happy to help you with your structure and everything to make sure you're not going too hard hitting, and but just to clarify, it might
Have
even
that
be
personal take, really.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
interesting.
because also if I'm saying to you, right, let's get the mind map going of what's happening in each scene,
Mhm.
they might have done something which actually none of your research has come across, but that was something that they did in that stage,
And
or
talking to them might inspire
Mhm.
those other scenes or those other statements that will go into the script.
Yeah.
So that would be
Yeah.
a really good idea.
so I think that might be a good
Um,
point of contact.
I had another question about the music track. I really liked your first music track selection. I thought the pitch and tone, it was almost bittersweet. It
Yeah.
had that optimism, but also was quite, melodic and reflective. But I'm less sure about your second one. It found we
Promotional video.
felt a bit.
Oh, there
it
was no second track.
Oh,
I
was that
think it
was
Oh.
just more about the
Oh,
That
lighting?
was
it's
the
ringing
voice-
out
that was
the
a- I think
It
that
was-
was the
It
voice.
was just background, not
Yeah.
right.
It
So
was
it was
the light.
more about.
The lighting one, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
like
that.
that.
Okay.
Because the short film we had, that they also did the music reflective, so
Yeah.
they also used different soundtracks.
Okay.
And have you thought about in terms of copyright clearance? So would you use that track, or are you still exploring in terms of?
That track I do believe is copyright free, although
Okay,
it does
so you
require
just
research.
pay
But
a
I think,
one-off fee, and then you could use it for
I think it's
different
royalty
uses?
free. I think it's just you can use it however.
And you need to investigate
But
that.
yeah, I think
because
it's making sure that
even
everything we use.
though it says copyright free, that generally means you can pay one very minor fee,
Mhm.
and then you can use it and put it on YouTube
Yeah.
and distribute it everywhere. But whereas, a lot of people say, oh, well, if it's copyright, then just use it wherever. But should you more widely distribute your film, then you do have to be very cautious about that. So that is something I would suggest you investigate into copyright.
Just one last comment, and saw Michael at the same time. Booking your one-to-one sessions that you need, so all those gaps in learning, so the dolly, the light panel,
Mhm.
book them in now. So
Yeah.
say to Michael, this week we're in production, so the week before can I have an hour session on the dolly, an
Yeah.
hour session on the LED lights.
And it's fantastic that you've identified those
Yes.
things
Yeah.
and that you are forward thinking in that way, and I'm very impressed
Yeah,
by
really
the
good.
amount of contingency that you have considered and the idea.
Yep, so I think overall, just a bit of research into whether we're going to do breaking the fourth wall or doing voiceover or how films use that. Book your one-to-ones with Michael. Didn't mention this, but I did think if you struggle for voiceover artists, talk to music.
Yeah.
They've always been really helpful in the past, and you just give them the script, they'll do it, and they'll give you the sound
Yeah.
file. Narrative needs to be explored in more detail in terms of what's happening in
Yeah.
each scene. Consider copyright clearance for your music, and then also perhaps this brief interview. Yeah, well done, guys.
Excellent.
Really
Thank
good.
you.